Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we raise the alarm on what's really happening in our country. And after another crazy week, we still don't know, but I'm very pleased to be joined by Satya. How are you doing today, Satya?
Hi, Tom. I'm really good. How are you?
I thought you weren't very good. I thought you were a bit jet lagged.
I am a little bit jet lagged, actually. Okay. Very jet lagged.
Good to have you back. You're wide awake?
Oh, I'm raring to go.
The Weekly Wake Up.
Raring to go.
Because it's just you and me today, so thanks everybody for listening. First of all, we'll be talking to Jennifer Nadell from the campaigning group Compassion in Politics about MPs behaving badly and how they could do better.
Yes, and then we're going to talk about the Nobel laureates, the three of them who won the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences this year.
Indeed, talking about understanding poverty, but we'll come into that in a moment. And then, and we had hoped to talk to Zach Polanski from Extinction Rebellion, and Zach actually also featured on as a subject of one of our Challenger for Change episodes on the Real Agenda, episode 30. But we were due to talk earlier today, but unfortunately Zach couldn't make it. So we hope to catch up with him again soon to find out what's going on there.
I think they're a bit busy at the moment, aren't they,
I
Tom?
I think they are.
And we are actually going to talk to Shreya Nanda from the Institute of Public Policy Research, and she's going to talk about how to boost funds to our public services by taxing the wealth that we all create. But actually it's in the hands of the few. So, that's going to be quite interesting what she says about that.
We'll find out how we do that. And there are ways and means. Okay, well, that's all on the Weekly Wake Up from the Real Agenda Network. And this show is about ideas. We like to talk about the answers and we like to talk about action. And we're part of the Real Agenda Network of podcasts for political change.
And just a reminder that we're always looking for people to join the team, whether you want to help with content, production or marketing. So if you are interested, please contact us and let us know and get involved. We also want to know what you think of the Real Agenda. So email us at info@realagenda.org. And if you do like our show, pass on the word and let your friends know. And because we do want more and more people listening to us, or write a review or sign up as a supporter in our supporters group on our website, realagenda.org.
We're getting a regular mailing, which will be going out to those people that sign up, tell them everyone what's going on.
We just want more people to get involved with us, really, don't we?
Well, that's the thing. And above all, to take action, actually. This is the main thing we're trying to get over, that actually there are ways that you can take action and change actually is also possible. We like to hear from you, so that would be absolutely great. All our topics are connected to the fundamental issues of reducing inequality, resolving poverty, and bringing social and economic justice, because that's the real agenda. Let's get cracking. All right, Satya?
Yeah, let's go, Tom.
Okay, and we've missed the biscuits today, haven't we? We forgot the biscuits.
Yeah, stock and order is what I learnt in retail. We haven't been doing very well on that one.
Well, we're all right as long as we can last the course, and we'll make it up for it at the end.
I'm flagging a bit. I need a biscuit.
Yeah, you do. That's what I was thinking, actually.
I need a biscuit.
Maybe you need something to keep you awake. What we're going to talk about now, many people have been really saddened by the rampant sort of rhetoric in the House of Commons recently, and generally in public life and online, in an attempt to knock some grown-up sense into the proceedings. Campaigning group Compassion in Politics got together with other group More United and launched a new code of conduct on October the 2nd and asked MPs to sign up. So to get an update, we called Jennifer Nadell, the co-founder of Compassion in Politics, to find out more about why they felt there was a need to have a code of conduct.
It was clear that events had hit an even greater nadir in Parliament after Boris Johnson's reaction to the fears of MPs and an MP being reduced to tears, and it was clear that some action needed to be taken. We were contacted by MPs and we decided to facilitate them all coming together unilaterally without waiting for the Speaker to introduce a new code, because there just wasn't time. It's clear that action needs to be taken now. So we took the definition of workplace bullying that ACAS uses, in other words, the very same code of conduct that would apply in every other workplace in the UK, and we turned it into a pledge and asked MPs to pledge that they would observe that way of behaving. It's utterly outrageous that the people who make the laws don't have to comply with those laws themselves. In no place of work would the sort of behaviour we see on the floor of the Commons be tolerated, and yet we regularly see it in Parliament. And at the same time, we also worked with a group of young working class kids in Salford and Manchester to enable them to launch a petition, because they were very much thinking the same thing. And their hashtag is, if I did this. And the truth is, if anyone else in this country behaved the way our parliamentarians behave, they would lose their jobs, they'd be excluded from school, they'd be shunned socially, and yet we seem to think it's acceptable. So we were really, really heartened by the number of MPs that responded. We've actually had 85 who have signed up already, and we're expecting more to. And the code is now with the Speaker in the hope that it may be taken on as an interim measure.
So what happens next?
The event went incredibly well, and one of the things that I was most moved by was how grateful politicians were that we were facilitating this. And we had MPs from 7 different parties signing up. So it really was a very powerful event. The speakers of both houses are now considering the codes, and we're hoping that they will implement them so that it becomes official policy, not just a unilateral action. So it's really a concerted push to get this adopted officially as well as unofficially by the MPs who signed it.
Okay, that's great, Jennifer. So what's up next with Compassion in Politics as a campaigning group?
Well, obviously we have an election in the offing, so we will be working to try and get as many MPs as possible to sign up to put compassion first, and also to adopt a similar code of conduct in the ways that they campaign. Looking further ahead, we're also setting up an all-party parliamentary group. That's a group of cross-party group of MPs, which we hope will facilitate cross-party working in the way that we have seen recently as a result of Brexit. We've seen people crossing party lines. We've seen new alliances being formed. We've seen politicians voting on the basis of issues rather than tribal loyalties. So we're setting up this parliamentary structure to enable that kind of cross-party working to continue. And obviously, we will be doing everything we can to make sure that a compassionate agenda is what is promoted through that cross-party group.
That's absolutely great, Jennifer. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're really, really busy making all these things happen, and we wish you all the best with that. And we'll be
Thanks,
look forward to further updates.
Wow, that's interesting. 85 MPs have signed up to that.
I have now, from 7 political parties.
So that's fantastic.
It's a really good start, actually, and we hope that actually behaviour will improve, which is the idea.
So how are we going to hold these people to account?
It is hoped that the MPs that are signed up will stick to their word. Obviously, if we find that they're not behaving as it is, there might be some issues to be had. They might be called to the headmaster's study.
Will the Speaker have a little go at them?
They are hoping that it will get adopted officially by the speakers in both houses. And so that's one of the aims of this. And there's discussions going on at the moment, I understand, to see whether that will happen.
Yeah, because I think Jennifer makes a really good point in that interview where she says that actually nowhere else in our society would this kind of behaviour be acceptable. You know, where people are shouting at each other and saying terrible things to each other. You know, people would be taken to task straight away. And some of the things they do are illegal. They're against the law. And yet MPs just get away with it.
It wouldn't happen in the boardroom then, would it, Satya?
It depends on which boardroom you're in.
Okay, well, moving on, tell us a bit more about the Nobel Economics Prize, Satya.
Okay, so this year, the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences was won by 3 people. Esther Duflo, Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kramer. Interestingly, Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee are married, so they're a couple. And they won it for their work that they're doing on tackling poverty around the globe. So all 3 were recognised for their experimental-based approach to tackling global poverty and using randomised control trials to discover which educational outcomes or child health initiatives actually work. So they work with communities to see what would actually work properly. And the great news is that Esther Duflo, one of the laureates, is the youngest ever laureate at 46 years old. she's also the first woman to win the economics prize. So that's great for women. I think that's brilliant. And they went into small communities and they looked at different ways of doing intervention, different ways of doing their research, different approaches to tackling poverty and working with the people who are actually experiencing poverty, and worked in different ways and found that actually their work created much, much more better results than if there were people sitting in offices assuming what might work for people and making policy on the back of that.
I think one of the things there, isn't it, it's actually analysing or looking at the lived experience, as they say, and talking to the people that are actually going through this has given a better insight. Whatever way you look at poverty, it's bad. But, and you think, well, do we actually need more research? But I understand from this work, it's actually made resolving or minimising poverty more effective.
Yes, exactly. ADT Fourth World, the organisation, is a human rights-based anti-poverty organisation. They've actually done some research, and it was interesting that what their approach was very similar to the approach of these Nobel laureates who've won the prize. And they actually put out their research findings just this Monday on the 14th of October.
That's right. And indeed, I was there at the launch, and it was also
Yeah.
organised. It was actually at Amnesty International, and it was organised in conjunction with the campaigning group, human rights campaigning group, Just Fair.
And they call their research Understanding Poverty and Social Rights Through the Lived Experiences. So interestingly, they were doing very similar things. And what they did was go into communities and work with people who were actually living in poverty. And they researched, they actually involved them in the research that they were doing to really get to the crux of the matter. And they talk about, some of the things that those people were affected by. And the most sad thing actually was that how poor people, not only did they suffer the effects of poverty and how being poor affected them, in terms of their life experiences, but also then the stigma and the negative judgments that they also had to face as part of being poor. So lots of people think that if you're poor, you must be this way or that way, and have very negative views about who you are as a person. And that makes the whole thing about living in poverty just so much worse, I think. There were 7 key messages that they've come out with. Shall I just go through them? I think it might be quite interesting for our listeners. The first one, the messages that they want to give, but were findings from their research, is that it's essential that people with lived experience participate in tackling poverty. And that will require time, careful planning and commitment, obviously. The second one is that there is a need for better indicators of poverty. So how do we measure poverty? How do we capture the human experience of poverty? Third, there's inadequate financial resources are a cause of poverty. And we need to make sure that actually we realise that as a society. When people have very low financial resources, it does take away their control and it shortens their lives. Fourthly, the impact of and stigma and the negative judgment that I've just talked about. And they're saying that that is particularly painful part of poverty. The participants in their research agreed that services should be enabling and supportive, but some of the services that they have experienced, they find are controlling and oppressive. So we really, really need to look at how we are providing services to people who live in poverty. And also that individual resilience is no substitute for better systems, structures and policies, so that it should not be left to an individual to find their own way through this, because sometimes it can be impossible for an individual to find their way through some of these things, that it is actually really important and our duty as a society to make sure that we have better systems, better structures and better policies in place to help and support these people to come through their experience of poverty, and so that it doesn't last too long, so it's not poverty long term, that there is a way out of it if someone finds themselves in that position.
We need to tackle the underlying causes of poverty and the whole economic system, which was designed, at various times, but we now need to redesign it so that it actually benefits those that are currently suffering and can turn their lives around. And going from this extreme, talking about poverty, let's look at the other end of the scale and look at wealth. So, there's a lot of research about poverty. Let's have a look at our economy and how taxation, which has been described as the price of civilization, can be fairer. In our economy, we all create the wealth, but it's our current system that means it's only accumulated by a few, and the wealth inequality divide is getting wider. We just talked about so many people being in poverty. All of us rely on publicly funded services and support systems like education, roads, railways, and the National Health Service. And our public services are especially important to those people that are struggling, such as our welfare system. And we need to strengthen these supports to solve poverty and make sure everyone has a decent life. One way of helping to achieve that is rebalancing the taxation system to create a greater contribution from wealth rather than just from the income from the paid work that we all do. So the Institute of Public Policy Research recently set up their Centre for Economic Justice. Now, this followed on from the publication of its milestone report entitled Prosperity and Justice in 2018. And in September 2019, the Centre produced a paper on reforming tax on income and wealth. So we gave a call to Shreya Nanda, an economist with the IPPR, who wrote this paper, and asked her to give us the background to the proposals.
So our proposal is that income from wealth should be taxed the same as earnings. So currently, income from earnings is taxed much more highly than income from wealth. So we looked specifically in this report at capital gains income. So people, the top rate of capital gains tax is 20% for most assets compared to 45% for income. And on top of that, there are a range of tax reliefs. So somebody who earns £100,000 in capital gains tax would pay £14,000 in tax without any tax relief, whereas someone who earns the same amount in wages would pay £33,000 in tax, or closer to £40,000 once employer national insurance contributions are taken into account. So we think this isn't fair, and they should be taxed the same.
Why do you think this has been the case for so long?
They were aligned in 1988, and it stayed the same until 2008, when capital gains tax was brought down. So we think it should go back up again.
It's quite a straightforward thing to do, isn't it? It could be sort of a day one thing that a government could do, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly, because it's not about creating a new tax, it's just about rolling capital gains into the existing income tax system. So yeah, it's less complicated.
So what was the other thing that you proposed as part of this paper that you put forward?
So our other proposal was to do with the income tax system. So that was about streamlining the income tax system. So instead of the system we have currently with bands, you'd have a formula-based system, so the tax rate would rise smoothly as your income rises, and you'd roll national insurance into the income tax system as well. So this would sort of remove some of the irregularities that you currently have with the system, where people who, at the point where the personal allowance starts being clawed back, you have people taxed at like a marginal rate of like 60%, and we think that doesn't make sense.
What about increasing the personal allowance?
I think our take on that is that governments frame that as like a positive thing to help people on low incomes, but actually increasing the personal allowance mostly helps those on higher incomes, because obviously it benefits everybody who pays income tax. So it's actually a regressive move. So we think that changes like these that spread taxes more on people with higher incomes are better than changes like raising the personal allowance.
Just with the personal allowance, because you could raise the personal allowance and then increase the tax rates further up. So actually those on higher incomes wouldn't see any benefit from the increase in personal allowance. It just seems crazy to me that people on low incomes, government living wage and the real living wage, are having to pay income taxes.
Yeah, I agree. And the change that we're proposing to do with taxing income from wealth would allow more of the tax base to come from people with wealth rather than from people who would have to go out and work.
How much more money would that actually raise for the Treasury?
These things are very uncertain to estimate, but we did our best go at estimating it. So we used data from HMRC and estimates published by the Treasury in 2010 when the rates were raised on how much money that would raise. And we estimate that these changes could raise between £6 billion and £21 billion a year, depending on whether or not a tax-free rate of return allowance is introduced. So that would be like a tax cut on the first whatever percent of returns that you make.
So what happens next then?
I think that people across the political spectrum realise that people feel like the economy isn't working for them, and something needs to be done to make it more of a fair social contract so everybody has a chance to do well. So, and that's why, people across the political spectrum are talking about problems like housing, low incomes and so on. So I think, we just have to not get distracted by all the crazy things that are happening in the news and keep on pushing this idea, and then hopefully it will get implemented.
That's why we call this a real agenda, because it's what you're talking about that makes a big difference to those that are having a hard time, and very little difference to those that are very, very financially secure. Are really real issues that need to get solved now, and could be if we had the political will. Yeah,
and we know from polling that about 70% of the public support this idea, and about 35% think that income from wealth should be taxed more highly than income from work.
So let's hope then, Shreya, that this is what's going to happen. So what's next anyway? What are you working on next?
We're currently working on a paper on the housing market, the financialization of housing, how it's become an asset. Watch out for that, probably in January.
Anyway, that's great, Shreya. I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining us on The Real Agenda.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you think, Satya?
I think it needs to be done.
It certainly does. I think
it needs to be done, definitely. It's eye-watering amounts of money that at the moment we don't have access to, that actually legitimately we should have access to.
Well, I mean, as I said, it's so crazy that, income from wealth is taxed at a lower rate than income from earned income. Just doesn't make sense. And the good thing about that is that it can be something that could be put in place fairly quickly. And they used to be at the same level, but they're not now. So why is that?
I don't understand the thinking that would have gone in terms of, lowering that rate in the first place. Do you?
Well, I don't understand it, but because some people with a different mindset who have the feeling that the wealth that they have, they created and it was done for them. And, this view that I've already paid tax on my income, so why should I be paying tax on my wealth? And funnily enough, years ago, I sort of used to think like that. And I now realize a complete error of your ways, because this wealth increases in value. It can go down, but through no fault of your own, from no involvement from you, whether it's a property, whether it's an asset that increases in value. And, you haven't contributed to that. It's the rest of society that's made that happen.
I just think that, okay, if people, make money, they work hard, they make money, I have no problem with that. If, some people are going to be more wealthier than others. That's never going to change. But actually what I find very difficult at the moment is the extremeness of it, that it just gets worse and worse, and that gap gets bigger and bigger. And what are people going to do with all this money? Actually, that's what I was thinking. What are these wealthy people going to do with so much money? And actually, when you see that there are people living in such poverty that they cannot actually even get the basics that are our human rights.
Well, I'll tell you what, it is about human rights as well. But I mean, this is the thing. Why is it not the number one? We'll talk about our own country. Why is it not the number one priority? Whatever happens with our relationship with the European Union, the most important thing is that we've got 14 million people in poverty. We've got loads of people struggling, and it needn't be that way. We change the tax system. We take other initiatives about increasing wages and welfare. We make more affordable housing. It can change. Why are we not doing it as number one priority? We should not stop until we're able to change that situation.
Well, I was quite struck, actually, when Boris Johnson made his speech.
Sorry, you're not meant to mention that.
I know, sorry. When he made his speech, he did not mention poverty once. 14.2 million people living in poverty in this country, and he did not mention it once.
And it's like in the Queen's speech. I mean, there was nothing in there, housing and all these key issues. Yes, talking about we're going to build more hospitals. And anyway, without getting into the Queen's speech too much, because it was really quite more of a sort of woolly election manifesto.
Yes.
But there's nothing there, and it's not the top priority. So we know that. And that's what we appeal to people listening, that we've got to make this our number one priority, because that's the real agenda and that's what's key to most people's life.
But also it has such a wide-ranging effect, negative effect on all of us as a society. So when people are poor and they don't get the same chances as other people, then we're going to have more crime. We're going to have a less educated society for the future, our next generation. And people, our society is just getting more and more fractured. I think if people had their basic rights, if people had enough money to live on, if they had a roof over their heads, and people are more fulfilled about their basic needs, then we'd have a very different society than we have today.
We would, and we've got to fix it. So get out there and we'll get it sorted. In terms of what action people can take on these things, the things we've discussed already, talk to your friends, talk to your MP, talk to your local council, help out with the immediate needs and things like helping with food banks and other things. And a lot of people are doing a lot of great work, but we're not getting the fundamental policies change. And we've got to take action on this. We've got to come together. And another important issue is obviously the climate and the climate change and what is happening to our planet. As the saying goes, there is no planet B, so we have to act now. And we've been reminded strongly of this with the work and activity of Extinction Rebellion over the recent weeks. This is also so important that we've got to have action, and we've got to have very clear demands that are realisable and that the government does adopt that. Now, we had hoped to talk more about this today, as I think I mentioned earlier, but our friend Zach Polanski from Extinction Rebellion unfortunately couldn't make the time that we were going to do the interview, or rather I couldn't get hold of him. So we haven't got an immediate update for you, but maybe we'll talk to him again in another show.
Very, very important issue. And I think they're making their presence felt again, aren't they?
Well, they certainly are. I mean, I think you have to get a balance right, because we don't want to tip it too far that people are feeling very, completely disrupted, and it's making life very difficult for people. But it has been shown that to bring change, you have to be disruptive, civil disobedience. It does work. It has been proved to work.
So that's the show for this week. We hope we've woken you up a bit. And
have we woken you up?
I hope so. I'm awake.
You're feeling quite lively now.
I'm now awake,
Okay.
yes. Well, we hope we've woken all of you up out there, and we've helped to inform, inspire, and that you will want to join and get involved in making this change happen. So email us at info@realagenda.org, or contact us via our website, realagenda.org.
So what's up on the Real Agenda? What's coming up soon? Well, we've now got 5 series on the Real Agenda network. Each has its own feed, so you can subscribe to one or more. So there's the Real Agenda, which was the original podcast for political change, and we have Around the House, where we talk to MPs determined to make a difference. Challenges for Change, where we have conversations with campaigners. And our newest series, Profit for Purpose, which is about being a better business. And coming up soon will be an interview we did with Julian Richer, the founder of Richer Sounds. And of course, there's the Weekly Wake Up. We'll be back next Friday. So, special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. And don't just take our word for it. Reverse Media Group was recently listed as the 9th fastest growing private tech company in the UK. Well, one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians who are prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. There you go, Satya. Thanks very much. Anything else to add?
No, that's great. Thanks, Tom.
Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. That's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from
Satya. Goodbye.
Thanks, Satya. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.